Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here and welcome back to another video. Following many weeks of bitter postseason play, the 2023 Stanley Cup Finals have finally gotten underway, as the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights have each made it to the final round, and they are both eager to lift their first championship in franchise history. Now, since Florida were the lowest seeded team of this year's playoffs, and since Vegas were the best team in the West this season, this somewhat lopsided matchup on paper seems reminiscent of the more uneven finals of seasons past, such as the 1988 finals between the Dynasty Oilers and the Boston Bruins, the 1991 series between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Minnesota North Stars, or any finals involving the St. Louis Blues during the late 1960s and early 1970s. However, when asking the most seasoned hockey fans to present the worst final series of all time, many will mention the 1982 finals between the New York Islanders and the Vancouver Canucks. After all, thanks to the clear disparity between the two opponents and the conclusive manner in which the series was decided, the 1982 finals didn't really need to be played, as the winner was all but decided before the puck was even dropped. But why was this series the worst? Why did it fail to live up to the hype, and why has it received this unfortunate title? Well, let's take a look at it in a little more detail and try to figure it out, shall we? This is the story of the 1982 Stanley Cup Finals, the worst final series in NHL history. Now, in order to understand why this series has earned this reputation, let's take a look at each of the teams involved and their respective journeys to the event. Winners of both the 1980 and the 1981 Stanley Cup Championships, the New York Islanders would continue their cup-winning form during the 81-82 NHL season, as they took home the 1982 President's Trophy as regular season champions, thanks to their impressive 54, 16 and 10 record for 118 points in 80 games. Not only that, they also set a new league record for the most wins in a row, as they won 15 consecutive contests, a feat that has been surpassed just once in the last 40 years. Having clinched the first seed in the East and having secured home ice advantage throughout the playoffs, the Islanders would take care of business during the postseason. Despite a close 5-game series against the Pittsburgh Penguins in round 1, a 6-game victory against their rival Rangers, and a 4-game sweep of the Quebec Nordiques would help the Islanders reach their third final series in a row and earn them the opportunity to become the first American franchise to lift 3 consecutive Stanley Cup championships. Now, on the flip side, the Vancouver Canucks had produced a polar opposite experience to the Islanders, as their 81-82 season was the epitome of mediocre. After all, Vancouver had finished 11th place in the league standings, thanks to their rather underwhelming 30, 33 and 17 record for 77 points in 80 games. The Canucks had won less than half of their games that season, yet they still made it to the playoffs. Now, in Vancouver's defence though, there were 4 other teams that had reached the postseason with sub-500 records that year, and the Canucks were the best of that terrible bunch, so they could have done a lot worse, all things considered. Having secured the 4th seed in the Western Conference and having entered the playoffs as somewhat of a dark horse, the Canucks would surpass all expectations, as their 3-game sweep of the Calgary Flames, a 5-game victory against the Los Angeles Kings, and another 5-game series against the Chicago Blackhawks would see Vancouver somehow make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Now granted, the Canucks were the highest seeded team in each of these 3 series, so they had avoided any of the Western Conference's big hitters that year, and they had only faced sub-500 teams during the regular season en route to the finals. But earning your first trip to the big dance is still an impressive feat, opposition or not. With the 2 contestants decided, the 1982 finals was set to be one of, if not the most lopsided series the league had ever seen, as the 41-point differential between the President's Trophy winning Islanders and the 4th seed in the West Canucks became the largest regular season point differential in Stanley Cup Finals history, a record that still holds over 4 decades later. So how would this series play out? Would the juggernaut Islanders complete the three-peat, or would the underdog Canucks pull off their Cinderella run? Well, as the puck was dropped and the series got underway, the opening contest would kick things off with a bang, as both teams would score their fair share of goals and either side stood a chance to take home the W until the final buzzer sounded. With the score tied 5-5 after 60 minutes of play, Game 1 of the finals would be settled in overtime. And while Vancouver could have shocked the sport by stealing the win at Nassau Coliseum, the defending champions would ultimately get the job done, as the hat-trick goal from Islanders star Mike Bossy, with 2 seconds left in the overtime period, would give the home side the victory in Game 1 of the series. Unfortunately for the Canucks though, this opening contest would prove to be their best, as the series would get progressively worse for them the longer it went on. Though they would suffer a 6-4 loss in Game 2 and they would be down 2-0 in the series, Vancouver had held multiple leads in both of these contests, but the Islanders' wealth of cup-winning experience had proven more than enough to help them fight back, so Vancouver had squandered numerous chances to seize the advantage for themselves instead. Once the series moved to Vancouver and the Canucks had home ice, things would go from bad to worse for the underdogs. Thanks to continued scoring from Mike Bossy and a 23-save shutout by Islanders netminder Billy Smith, New York would take a 3-0 victory in Game 3 and hold an identical lead in the series too. Not the greatest performance during your franchise's first finals game on home ice, but they were playing the early 80s Islanders. Most teams suffered a similar fate at the time, you know. With New York sitting just 1 win away from sweeping the series, all eyes shifted to Game 4 of the finals. Would the Islanders complete the three-peat and carve their place in the history books, or would the Canucks find a way to fight back and take down the juggernaut of the sport? Well, after 60 minutes of play, Goliath would triumph over David, as the Islanders took a 3-1 victory, clinched the series in 4 games, and lifted the 1982 Stanley Cup. So the most lopsided finals in NHL history on paper turned out to be exactly that in practice too. As the Islanders won every single game of the series, they averaged over 4.5 goals a game, and they never trailed for more than a single period during that span. You can see why they had won 3 cups in a row at that time, couldn't you? I mean, that roster was simply astonishing. Following this rather disappointing final series, the Islanders and the Canucks would shake hands, go their separate ways, and produce completely different journeys in the 4 decades since. For the New York Islanders, their glory days weren't over just yet, as they would take care of business during the following 82-83 NHL season, make it all the way to the finals once again, and take home their 4th Stanley Cup in as many seasons, cementing their place as one of the greatest dynasties the league has ever seen. Unfortunately though, this championship would also be their last, as they have failed to take home the trophy in the 40 years since their 1983 win. In fact, the Islanders have only reached the finals once since their last championship, and that came just a year later in 1984, where they were finally dethroned by the Oilers dynasty of the mid to late 80s. 4 cups in a row is a pretty legendary accomplishment, but making 0 finals appearances in nearly 40 years isn't exactly great, is it? It's a good thing they made the most of their cup window when it was open, eh, folks? On the flip side, the Vancouver Canucks would struggle to repeat their Cinderella run, as they would fall in the first round or miss the postseason entirely in each of the next 9 seasons of play. That said, they have made several trips to the finals since then, as they earned a spot in both the 1994 finals against the New York Rangers, as well as the 2011 finals against the Boston Bruins too. Unfortunately though, the Canucks would fall at the final hurdle in both of these series. They would be forced to watch their opponents lift the trophy yet again, and they are still chasing their first championship in franchise history to this very day. Not the results that Canucks fans have wanted, but they've made it to the finals far more recently than the Islanders have, and they've done so several times too. That's gotta count for something, right? So thanks to the clear disparity between these two sides on paper, and thanks to the rapid speed in which this series was concluded, the 1982 Stanley Cup Finals has earned its reputation as the worst finals the league has ever seen. That being said, this series did see the winning side secure the three-peat and the losing side make their first finals in franchise history. That doesn't sound all that bad to me, you know? Whether it's the best of the bunch or the worst of the lot, something has to hold this title, and unfortunately in this instance, the honour falls to 1982 and 1982 alone. And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. That was a look at the worst Stanley Cup Finals in NHL history. What do you guys think about the 1982 finals? Was it the worst final the league has ever seen, or do you think a different series should hold this title instead? Do let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.